outstanding employees give you highly satisfied customers. So one flows into the other. But clearly, for Scientist.com, it is all about the culture. It is about having outstanding employees and nurturing them, both in their personal life and in their professional life. That is our path to success.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Culture is important to your business. Culture is so important that it is really how you guys work together and you actually get things done. It's how you communicate. It's how you think. It's how you collaborate. It's the courage and confidence you bring to everything that you do. The lack of intention on culture will cost you not just money, but also time, and also will not create the kind of workplace that really are able to get the highest potential out of all your people. Culture really is the backbone of your business. Today's guest is Kevin Lustig. Kevin is with Scientist.com. He's the co-founder of this marketplace for scientist research. We talk about some of the background of that, but the most important thing is why culture is so important for your business and what you can do to ensure that you have a strong culture in your business. The one thing I love about this interview was we should really be hiring people that are company first. That viewpoint of company first means they're not going to put their own personal needs ahead of the company and ahead of the mission that they're trying to create. Now, I talked to Kevin about what that is and how he pulls it out of people through the interview process. But you want someone who is company first. And that does sound pretty good if you're a leader that really believes in having the right people to grow the company. Thanks for tuning in here to Grow Think Tank. Really excited about sharing this with you. And before you run, I have done so many interviews over the last few weeks. I have such an exciting time to share with you that those interviews have been organized into the 12 core principles of fast growth companies. So all you have to do to get that is go to genehammett.com/worksheet. And so you can get the 12 principles, and I've been able to go in there and find which episodes will align to each individual episode. When you subscribe to Grow Think Tank, you will find exactly what you need so that you can move forward. And many of them haven't been published yet, depending on when you're hearing this, but you can tune in to the date that means the most to you. Now, here is Kevin Lustig. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, you are impressive with what you've done with Scientist.com, and I'm really impressed with some of the concepts of leaders that you've had. I've already let the audience know a lot about you, so tell us about you and who you serve.
So I am the CEO of a company called Scientist.com, and we are on a mission to transform how medical research is done. In many ways, we're like an Amazon.com for scientists, and essentially we sort of provide the picks and the shovels, if you will, for modern day pharmaceutical research.
Well, that's a little bit of a mystery because I know there's so much money that goes into pharmaceutical research. I've never been in that world, so I'm relying on you a little bit here. Why is this Amazon.com marketplace for scientists something that's really caught on?
Well, the pharmaceutical industry spends about $150 billion every single year doing medical research. And for the past 50 or 60 years, they did it in a very clear and simple way. They spent all of that money in their own research laboratories. But starting about 10 years ago, that whole process began to change. They began to realize that there were thousands of outside laboratories that could do the work better, faster, and cheaper than they could. And so they began to stop doing the work in their own laboratories. They began to lay off tens of thousands of scientists. And instead, they began to do research in a very new way. They began to design the research experiments still in their own laboratories, but then the actual research, they would outsource. They would reach out to one of the thousands of research companies around the world, and they would get those companies to do the research for them. So we've gone from a situation where $150 billion of research was being done within the pharmaceutical industry labs themselves to a situation where about half of that, over $70 billion of that money is now being spent with these outsourced companies. And that's where a marketplace comes in. We make it very easy for a scientist within a big pharmaceutical company to go out to hundreds of outside research suppliers and help them get their experiments done as quickly as possible.
Well, I can see that you're excited about this. When you thought about this idea, were there other competition, or was it just your idea and you were one of the first to the market on this?
There were a few other companies that came before us, but for the most part, we're one of the first e-commerce marketplaces that the industry has seen. And so it's been a long, well, as I'm fond of saying, we're an overnight success, 10 years in the making. It's been a very difficult 12 years is actually what it really truly has been to get to where we are today in a dominant position as a market leader.
Well, you're not alone, because every leader I've ever seen there's just so much more to the work that's made them successful than what people see. And I appreciate you saying that today. Kevin, one of the things that we talked about, your concept of growing a company, is it about 70 employees? Is it about right?
Yes, we're about 70 today.
One of the concepts that you really kind of over-index on is culture, right?
Correct.
Why is culture so important to companies, do you think?
So a great culture is the defining characteristic of a company. And it really allows you, how do you say it? It's really that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And a great culture allows a small, talented group to take on incredibly difficult problems and really ultimately change the world. So I really believe that a culture is at the center of every incredible company. And in our case, we're a very small company. For the most of our years, we were 10 or 20 people, and we were trying to change a $1 trillion industry. It's kind of like the pharmaceutical industry is an ocean liner, and it's going at a fairly high speed in one direction. And we were this little speedboat that's sort of zipping around trying to get it to change direction. And we knew that the only way we were ever going to succeed was to create a tight-knit culture, have a very clearly defined mission, and hire fantastic people that can work together in a way that creates the whole being more than the sum of its parts.
It would probably help our audience here, because everyone has a different definition of even some of the most basic concepts. How do you define culture like you would, if you're speaking to a child?
So if I'm speaking to a child, I would say that culture is about how we treat each other. Right? It's about whether we're going to share our toys with our friends, whether we're going to work together, whether we're going to interpret people's behavior in a very positive way. When we see a friend do something that we think is wrong, we're going to go to them and we're going to talk openly about it. We're going to be transparent. Now, all these pieces are critical elements to an outstanding culture. But in its essence, culture in many ways is a code of conduct, right? It is about how we interact, and whether or not, and this is incredibly important, whether or not we end up giving the benefit of the doubt in our interpretations, because it's easy to hear people say something and go interpret it in 4 or 5 different ways. In a great culture where people are nurturing each other, they interpret those situations in a very positive way and avoid conflict because of that.
I love the definition. I mean, I asked you that to basically challenge you a little bit, because it takes a very business aspect of this to our childhood, but I think you knocked it out of the park there, Kevin. When we were talking last week about what we would actually talk about today, You talked about the importance of culture. You started really early in really thinking about culture within your company. Like, how many employees was it when you really started thinking about the culture you want to create?
Well, this is actually the second company I founded. And it was during that experience founding my first company that I realized that in a research company, culture is absolutely paramount. And what I mean by that is if you're building a factory that's creating a widget and you know how to create that widget, culture is probably a little less important. It's still important. But I've been involved in building pharmaceutical companies, in building marketplaces, and in those situations, we don't know what we're building. It's another analogy is, we're flying the plane while we're trying to rebuild it and make it faster and make it be more maneuverable. And that is just absolutely incredibly difficult to do. So when you're in a research environment, when you're solving problems that no one else has ever solved, culture is just absolutely essential to your success.
And I see the analogy there because if you did have a widget, so to speak, and you have the processes defined, you just want to create more widgets at a higher quality, at a lower cost. There's very incremental improvements to that. But for the most of us, and this is the clients I interact with, maybe the people listening in here, we're doing something with our clients that's never been done. It's evolving and changing so fast. There's no way it looks like a widget because of that aspect. And that's where culture and collaboration are so important, wouldn't you say?
I would absolutely completely agree with that. I've really found that as a CEO, the most important role that I play in the company is creating an environment and defining a mission around which an incredibly strong culture can be built. Yes, I'm there to help raise money. I'm there hopefully to help with projects, but the main role that a great CEO plays is to not just build a culture, because as you know, cultures are very fragile, right? You need to continue to tend that culture. It's almost like a garden. You need to go in every day. And sometimes it's removing the weeds, sometimes it's fertilizing. It is really very similar. You need to keep an eye out at all times, because even one bad apple can really undermine a great culture.
You've mentioned mission a few times here, Kevin, and I want to zero in on it for a second because I've seen the importance of having something that other people can attach to. Like when you're bringing on hiring people, like they want the same success that you see as the mission of the company. Did your mission change at all in that first 5 years, or was it pretty steady toward what you were trying to create?
It was very steady. Our mission is to make it possible to cure all human diseases by 2050.
Okay.
It's a mission that you can be proud to go and tell your mother about and your parents. And I know it sounds maybe a little bit of delusions of grandeur, but the way we think about it more is that trillion-dollar pharmaceutical industry is a giant rock on top of a hill, and we're this little teeny lever, and we're trying to lever this rock up. And if we can just get that lever in and push it in the right way, we could get that rock rolling downstream to a place where drugs will be tenfold less expensive to develop, where we'll have tenfold more drugs on the market for that $150 billion that we're spending every year. We're spending that money obviously incredibly inefficiently. And what we're trying to do is build a marketplace that allows us to spend that money incredibly efficiently and put a lot more drugs on the market for people that need them. So for us, the mission from day one was to transform medical research. And I have to be honest, 12 years ago, when we told people that, many laughed and said, good luck with that. That's something that will not happen in your lifetime. And we're 12 years in, and we're only 5% of the way, but we've clearly made significant progress. It's clearly doable. And I believe our success is really all about defining that mission in those early days and making sure when people came in, they knew that we were doing something incredibly important. It's why, in a great culture environment, you have very little turnover. We've lost just a few people, like a handful of people over the past 5 years. Why? Because they appreciate the transparency, they appreciate the fact that we're doing something important, and as a culture, we've done our best to create that environment in which everyone can thrive both personally and professionally.
I want to break in right here because what Kevin talked about with mission is so important. I see this all the time. People just aren't really paying attention to the core mission that the company is creating, and they don't really have that well defined. So if your mission is not well defined to others, not just to yourself, then it's hard to hire them in to find that alignment of the mission. If you do have the right mission, the feeling of that inside the organization is really intoxicating, if you will, because it's kind of like the rowers in a boat all rowing together. They know where they're going. They know where the finish line is. And your mission may not have a finish line, so to speak, but you understand that everyone knows where we're going together. They have a common direction, and they're willing to put forth the effort to get there. Now, I want to go back to the interview, but I just wanted to say how important mission is to your overall company growth. I would go more into this mission thing because I know how important it is, and a lot of people get caught up on. But we're here to build a business. We're going to make some money, and we've got boards to satisfy, and we're going to sell one day. But when you think about mission, it's much more than that. Like it seems like it comes from your soul, Kevin. Like, what do you say to others that say that mission might not be as important as you think it is?
Well, I would say for me, my whole life has always been defined around a purpose that I have set for myself. And back when I was about 10 years old, I decided I was going to cure cancer. And I was going to be a research scientist, and I was going to work in the lab. And I have stuck to that mission, if you will, that purpose ever since I was 10 years old. So for me, it's more than just a mission for the company. It really provides a purpose to my life, and I hope it provides more of a purpose to the people that are here at the company as well. So it's more about why are we here as humans, and what are we going to do with the short time that we're here on this earth. I made a decision long ago that I wasn't going to waste that time. I was going to try to do something that was, of course, fulfilling for me, but that also would be something that would leave the world a better place than when I found it. And I think we all need to be doing that in our lives, regardless of whether you're doing medical research or working in a garden or working on a train. It doesn't really matter. There's honor in everything we do, and there's a purpose that we can all define for ourselves. I just happen to have defined the very difficult mission of changing $1 trillion industry for the better. It's been
I am totally with you. I'm really excited by what you're doing here and how you're doing it. I do want to go a little bit further down this line of creating a great culture. So after you have a great mission, what do you think the next step in this journey for building that just really competitive advantage culture?
So it really is hiring the absolute best people. It's really because if you have a great culture and you have good people, even if you started out with bad ideas, you can turn those bad ideas into good ideas. If you have a great culture, you're going to hire bad people. They're going to take your good ideas and ruin them, and they're not going to take your bad ideas and make them into good ideas. So clearly, in terms of building a culture, it's about making sure you bring the right people onto the team and you nurture them in the appropriate way. And it's really about, in many ways, about avoiding the wrong people, because it turns out that culture is incredibly fragile, and even one bad egg in a team of 60 or 70 people can ruin it for everyone. It gets back to what we said before about how culture is not something you establish and then you walk away. It's really something that you need to nurture each and every day.
I'm not going to ask for names here, but have you come into that one bad egg that had an impact on culture that you had to make a hard decision on?
Yes, I have. And that's really the hardest thing in a company like ours, because we hire very slowly so we get the best people, but we also fire very slowly. And because we try to fit, once we bring them in, we try to figure out, okay, maybe they didn't fit in this role. Let's get them into this role. They didn't fit there. We'll get them into this role. But occasionally it has been true that I have concluded that because someone was more of a bad fit for the culture, that they did need to go. And we made the tough decisions in those very few cases. But we did everything we could to try to get them to fit into a role before we did that, or try to get them to see the light. And I think in some ways, people's basic personality really plays a role here. In other words, we've actually hired some really good people who are very good at their work, but they weren't a very good cultural fit. And those people are even more challenging because, if they weren't working out well, you can change it. But if they don't fit the culture, that's something you're almost never going to change because that's part of what's in them. And you can't change who people are. So I found those to be the most difficult people to deal with within our environment. The people that are actually quite good at the work, but who aren't actually a very good fit for the culture, but yet who got through the door.
Kevin, what have you learned in defining if someone is a fit for the culture in the hiring process?
Well, for me, we hire very slowly. I often don't start out looking at the resume. I do that eventually, but I try to look and evaluate this person without the resume in hand because I find that can really get you thinking in the wrong direction. I look at how they interact. I make sure I bring them to lunches and dinners, and I look at how they interact with wait staff. I look at how they interact with me. I look at how they do throughout a long day. I talk to people that have worked closely with them. I do everything I can to try to figure them out and figure out whether there is a good fit. And for me, one of the defining characteristics of people that fit our culture is that they put, and I don't want to bring this too far, but they put the company first. They put the company brand ahead of their personal brand. For example, when they're making a decision, they're not thinking what's in it for me. They're thinking of the company and the mission first. And I really do find that to be one of the defining characteristics of the best cultural fits for Scientist.com.
Now, I wanted to stop here and break this for a second. Company first. What comes to mind when you think about someone who is company first? Well, for me, they think about not just what they're trying to get out of it, not just their paycheck, not just their vacation, not just, the moment that they're in and have this viewpoint of they're there just to get a paycheck. Company first people are really kind of tuned into what are we doing with the mission and the purpose of our company? How do we work together to really put that above everything else? All the political aspects that happen in some companies as they grow and add more people and people worried about, not getting opportunities. That all goes to the side because people that are company first are willing to really put forth and sacrifice themselves to grow the company. It really does kind of really spark something inside me. Hopefully it does you too. Now back to the interview with Kevin. Well, that's a really, specific thing that I really appreciate you sharing that with us. How do you actually know if someone's company first in the interview process?
It is very difficult. You can usually tease it out through a specific line of questioning, trying to get at whether they were like that at past companies, and by talking about what's important to them in life, what's important to them in the company, what were the things they liked and didn't like about the cultures in the past companies they've been in. So those questions like that can sometimes tease it out, but I've got to be honest. Now that we're up to 70 people, it is very, very difficult to maintain that level that we would want to attain. In other words, you're going to make mistakes. You need to recognize that when you're more than 10 or 15 people, you will make mistakes in the hiring process. And you need to deal with those mistakes. You need to do everything you can to get them to fit. And then if they don't fit, you need to help ease them out into a better path for them. It's something I had a hard time coming to grips with because back when we were 10 or 15 people, we vowed that we would fit everyone into the culture. They would all stay. We would always find a role. It was family. And now as we're 70, it's becoming more, maybe a little less family and more team. We're a team, and sometimes, you bring the wrong people onto the team, and you need to deal with that.
I want to wrap this up with, I had asked you this, and I ask a lot of leaders this one question. As a leader, what's more important, customers or employees?
I believe very firmly that employees are the most important piece of the equation. Outstanding employees give you highly satisfied customers. So one flows into the other. But clearly, for Scientistcom, it is all about the culture. It is about having outstanding employees and nurturing them, both in their personal life and in their professional life. That is our path to success.
Well, Kevin, I really appreciate you being here. I love a lot about this interview, but the fact that you look at company first is such a really impressive kind of place, and really having a mission that has gone with you since being 10 years old. I can see why you're as successful as you are. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Gene. I appreciate it.
Wow. What a great, powerful interview. I love so much. Did you notice the passion he has about culture and about the importance of the people inside the organization? Did you also notice the passion he has for the mission of the company? Something that he started when he was 10 years old. Your mission is really a common thread amongst everyone coming into it. Do they care enough about what you're trying to create in the world you're creating through the business? It's not just to make money. If you have a common mission, you will really have something special. So that's my piece today. Hopefully you're enjoying these interviews. Hopefully you're getting as much out of listening to these interviews as I get out of doing them. So as always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.